I'm Kimberly Underwood, Director of Digital News Media at Signal Media. Welcome to the Disruptive by Design podcast. In case you didn't know, Signal Media is the official news outlet of AFCEA International. You can check out our website at afcea.org. In this episode of Disruptive by Design, I'm speaking with Clinton Austin. Clinton has always kind of been around technology. He is an Air Force veteran, and he started as an Air Force network administrator. He's now a business development manager at CDW-G. And across his previous roles, such as at Jacobs, he was their chief innovation officer and director. And then before that was the data architect at Jacobs that supported SOCOM, the U.S. Special Operations Command. And for AFCEA, he was the co-president of our AFCEA Emerging Leaders. And for 2 years, he helped guide and develop the emerging leaders' efforts amongst the chapters around the world and, helping emerging leaders themselves. I love his sense of humor, and definitely check out his website at clintonaustin.com. He provides some helpful observations about his journey as a military technologist and the transition he made to being a civilian technologist. So without further ado, welcome to Disruptive by Design with Clinton Austin.
Hi, Clinton. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, tell us about yourself and kind of who you are and what you do.
Yes, ma'am. So my name is Clinton Austin, and I am a strategic business manager for CDW-G. CDW is a $21 billion a year company, typically known as a value-added reseller in the community. But the organization is maturing to be a solution provider. And so I'm helping them mature in the special operations community to include foreign military sales and the Marine Corps book of business.
Right, that sounds like an amazing field to be in for that community.
Yeah, and also part of my portfolio is also help CDW-G navigate the space community because in my previous role prior to going to CDW, I was a chief innovation officer and a director for a contract that was covering the Colorado Springs area. So kind of jack of many trades, but an expert at none.
I'm sure you're being humility there. And you were a warfighter serving our country. Can you talk about that?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm fourth generation military. And so when I decided to join the military, I decided to go Air Force. I was heavily influenced by my Navy father. And so I spent 7 years active duty. And so a lot of the different places that I was able to visit was when my first duty station was actually at Buckley Air Force Base. So I was part of space before space was cool. And then I transitioned to U.S. Southern Command, where I got my introduction to the special ops community, doing work out of U.S. SOC South. The primary mission at that time frame was to be able to rescue the 3 American hostages that was in Fort Control, Colombia. So that was my being pushed into the deep end and understanding that very unique arena in that culture.
Right, sure. And what was it about that experience that kind of has, I guess, helped shape your kind of views on, I don't know, maybe necessary technologies or policies or just any, I guess, insights from that?
So the amount of maturity that was associated being working at a combatant command headquarters, right? And at that time frame, because of my understanding of technology or the lack of understanding of technology, I learned that I had to be better than what I was yesterday. So that's where I kind of really developed my love of learning at that time frame. Understanding how I need to apply my learning in different environments that I might not be comfortable at. Predominantly, if you go into U.S. Southern Command, it's all Spanish speakers. When I first walked into the hallways, I actually had to step outside of the command to see if it still said U.S. in front of it because with my Southern y'all, I wasn't fitting in, right? And so I had to understand the culture of the South and Central America and how to be a technologist and be able to support a lot of the tier one, tier two type warfighters that were going in there and trying to recover those Americans.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. And can you talk about a little bit more about your day job and kind of, what you do and how you're kind of maybe applying your, war fighting skills, I guess, in that arena? And then I think you also mentioned, for people coming from the military, transitioning, it may not be an easy thing or straightforward necessarily.
So, yeah, it's a good question, and to be able to expand on that, right? So, when I left active duty, I was an Air Force Staff Sergeant, and I kind of did a cost benefit analysis of what's the difference being called Staff Sergeant versus Mister. And at that time frame, I was newly married, know what the divorce rate numbers were, and so, and I liked my wife enough to say that I'm going to make a transition, right? So when I became Mr. Austin going into contracting, I had to learn that role, that game, understanding the different roles of engagement, because in the military, they're very good on being able to coach expectations and career progression and how you would mature within the ranks. When you're working as a defense contractor, it's really the responsibility of your personal growth is your own. And so that means that I had to write my own resume, look at the different organizations that I need to be able to be a part of to be able to mature my own career and to be able to highlight my own weaknesses to be able to grow. And so my first AFCEA chapter was actually the South Florida chapter, where I was the scholarship chair. And so that allowed me to be able to get direct access to a lot of senior leaders, stand corrected, and to different individuals that had a different background than myself. And so for me to be able to talk into those or be able to influence in those different arenas, I had to change my own style up and to be a little bit more personable and do so. When I left out of Southern Command, I went and worked at AFCEAn over at the 11th IS and worked on the UAV platform for 4 years. And that was also going from one extreme to another extreme, right? Because the UAV platform does a lot of good work within the community, but it's a different type of stressor, right? And so being able to be clear and concise, talking about things that has a direct impact on the warfighter, you don't have time to be muddled with your words. You got to express your intent quickly. And that was also another position where I had learned that I had to be stronger, faster than what I was yesterday. And so with that continuing maturity of capabilities, I ended up I stopped at having a master's degree and 21 IT certifications because my focus now is shifting back to going to more to the mentorship capability and helping CDW do their business development. And not to sound cynical for the transitioning veteran and all that stuff, because there's a lot of good organizations that are going to help do that transition. One of them that I speak fairly high of is the DoD Skill Bridge program. That allows a safe environment for a veteran to transition over and work with a civilian counterpart to understand some of the rules. But when it comes to elements of defense contracting, it is not the military. You got to understand what your boundaries are, what you're willing to tolerate, and what you're not willing to tolerate. And you are responsible for your own career progression. And so where a military veteran is going to be tied to loyalty or loyalty to a mission, right? Where it's going to be a point where it's almost going to be a detriment to that individual because they're they're not going to take that risk, go to the new opportunity that's going to be able to pay them more or to be able to give them more experience, because they're going to still be tied to that mission. And so being able to help have a critical eye, develop mentors that are outside the company, and that someone's going to be able to help guide you to that path of what you're looking for. That's very important. And I don't think sometimes veterans don't do that well enough. Where it's not a cookie cutter solution. You got to be able to mentor, or you got to cater your mentorship style and be willing to be mentored to be able to get to the next stage. And because it's defense contracting and there's things called labor categories, LCATs, there's so much that a contract could pay a individual. So you got to understand what the upper and lower limits are and what you need to do to be able to achieve those higher rates. It's good that you're a veteran and that you have a security clearance because it gives you a niche market. But because you're in a niche market that has its own self constraints of because of the government rates itself, sometimes defense contracting might not be the best for your own personal growth. You might want to look at some of these outside opportunities to kind of help mature as a individual.
Right. And were there any skills or experiences that you had in the military that once you were in the civilian world, you were like, oh, okay, I got this. The military taught me this, and this was an advantage. Anything like that once you're in the civilian world that you saw?
Well, and not to sound morbid, but there's going to be very few opportunities over there in the civilian sector. It's going to be it's going to be a matter of life and death, right? And so if you put that into context, it's not a stressful environment. There's going to be self constraints that you're going to put in, and you always want to be able to do this a best job possible. But it's, once again, you're not dealing with elements of national defense or life or death, or there's so many different pressures that are applied when you're on the DoD side of the house. So if you keep that mentality and keep your composure, and to be able to think before you speak, and so that had to be a learned skill. There's the opportunities to be able to excel a lot more is there.
Right. And I, obviously with Signal Magazine, we have our monthly column called Disruptive Design. And it's meant for, emerging leaders under 40 to get their voice out there. And we were so gracious. You were so gracious in writing our column for October, and it was so clever and just so original, and and really on point. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I love that you got to showcase your writing skills. You're a lovely writer, but talk about your idea for the column and kind of what it was and what you covered.
So when I wrote the October's Signal article, it was when I was just coming off as the Chief Innovation Officer and Director for a nuclear deterrent mission that was supporting Colorado for the space mission out of Colorado Springs. And with me going from working at U.S. Special Operations Command at MacDill Air Force Base, which they took pride on being the technical edge because it gave them the tactical edge, right? And so when I went into the space community, there was things that I did not see for the past 20 plus years. A lot of it is legacy data or legacy technology. Let me stand correct to it. And there's individuals that are working in that environment that had a full career in the military and turned around and had another 20 years as a defense contractor up there. And so innovation or growth was probably not on the front burner for them. It was a stable, proven technology. And with all of the things that are going on, a lot of the reemergence of Cold War activities, and where you saw that there's been such rapid growth in technology, I think space needs to, and I think they are trying to be able to help modernize that technology. But part of the challenge is that they're still trying to develop their own identity, right? They're maturing from the days of being U.S. Space Command or U.S. Air Force Space Command to U.S. Space Command, and since they're in that process of being able to develop their own identity and their own capabilities, they need to strongly look at their technology stack. And that's Alexa for you, right? They need to be able to look at their technology stack, because it's really a matter of national defense if they don't do it well.
Right, and I know the Space Force, it's only a couple years old technically, and they're touting themselves as the only service that's digitally native. But I thought what was so great about what you pointed out was, wait a minute, there's some issues here. And just to give everybody a picture, you had this great, zombie killer kind of graphic idea. And so the column has a picture of a zombie with Fortran on his t-shirt. Can you kind of, I guess, talk a little bit more about some of the specific things that you're seeing that kind of are, I guess, holding the Space Force up that they kind of need to address?
So it really comes to the challenge of staffing, right? Having the personnel with the right clearances to be able to do the work. And so for me, if I was staffing in that arena, to find a 20-something recently college graduate or a young service member, to get them excited to learn Fortran programming is quite difficult. It's more of a challenge than I think people would really know, because who wants to learn a dead language? And so to be able to help modernize the environment, my little bit of a tongue-in-cheek humor on this was that they had to train zombie killers. They had to give them incentives to be able to understand this legacy technology, to include switch networks, to be able to understand Fortran, to be able to understand legacy code bases, and to be able to develop a guide path to be able to take what was originally done 30 to 40 years ago to the current technology stack. The prime example of this is when I was playing that director role, I hired someone that was a part of the Apollo 11 program because he was a Fortran programmer. Now, his wealth of knowledge, I could not touch it. I mean, he was in the NASA Hall of Fame, right? And so for me to say, hey, why do you want a job? Because he's got tired of being at home. But when I try to go hire the 20-something-year-old that knows AWS or Azure DevOps capability, and I say, hey, I want you to roll back your technology capability 30 years, when there's so many new and shiny tools that they can use, and for automation, it's a hard argument. And I don't think I know that leadership is aware of that, but I don't know if there's the funding or awareness to be able to go with it, in my opinion.
Right, sure. And any other observations or thoughts about that?
It's going to be a crawl, walk, run methodology, right? As the Space Force is doing its realignment from Air Force bases to Space Force bases, and the creation of the different deltas. And now you have a group of mission commanders that are trying to establish their own identity. Um, it's going to be a lot of different growing pains associated with that. And I also have to be honest about it, about being a capitalist, right? You do have different outside agencies like SpaceX or these other organizations that are also hungry for the same talent that the Space Force is going to be looking for. And so part of that is to look at, how do I maintain these young enlisted or junior officers, and how do I keep them within the ranks, and how do I help them mature as individuals so I can help strengthen my own capabilities.
Right, sure. Yeah, that's good advice. And then can you talk about your role at AFCEA, or maybe even start to the beginning, kind of how, I guess, how did you find AFCEA? How did you find emerging leaders? And then maybe go into your role, some of the roles you've played. Thanks.
So I've had a long career in AFCEA since I'm aged out, and a couple of my counterparts will always remind me, because of the touch of gray that I have in my beard, right? And so I started off on the local level. As I stated previously, I was the scholarship chair for the South Florida chapter, and then when I was at MacDill Air Force Base, I became the young AFCEAn there. Became and this is the young AFCEAn before we did the rebranding, and I was also the regional young AFCEAn in that area. So understanding how to work with the other chapters to be able to help grow those individual chapters led me into being the vice president of membership, and being able to help young AFCEANs at that time communicate to leadership the value of data. Being able to understand what is the true amount of numbers of young AFCEANs that we have. What is the demographics associated with young AFCEANs? And that kind of led me and Alicia Kelly to propose the different branding of the young AFCEANs at that time frame. Because young AFCEANs cover anyone who is 16 to 39 and a half. The way that I would talk to a high school student is going to be different from how I would talk to a college student or to a 30-something-year-old that's looking for that next stage in their professional growth. So by having those very distinct different levels allowed us to be able to better pro-market our message, the AFCEAN message, to these different organizations or these different levels of young AFCEANs, to show that this organization cares about your professional growth as you go through these different stages.
Right, and you're kind of joking that you aged out. So your role was with AFCEA headquarters as co-president, right, of the Emerging Leaders group, I guess internationally.
Yes.
Yeah, and what was that like? What were some of the highlights of leading in that role?
Well, one is the strength of the relationships that I was able to develop out of there. Honestly, I've already kind of mentioned the great and powerful Alicia Kelly, right, over at Trade Systems. She is a senior leader, but you also had Stephanie Hutch, who led for the longest time with the women of AFCEA to be able to provide a different view, and being able to have those relationships in the community that even kind of a little bit softened my own style of leadership, because where I would be, I'm talking to the special forces community all day, I would naturally have a very aggressive style or a very strong style, needless to so for me to be able to communicate to these different organizations, they had to be a little bit of process refinement or communication refinement, where they can say, hey, Austin, uh, throttle or throttle forward, to be able to help with these efforts. And so, and I give a lot of credit to AFCEA being able to go to the next stage that I'm at right now in my career, right? I play in those senior level roles, and being able to have exposure to a lot of senior leadership at that time frame, um, make developing the understanding that no one is bigger than you, no one is smaller than you, and that everybody is equal to you. The only difference is really the years of experience and the amount of responsibilities that that person maintained. But developing that communication style, um, allowed me to be a little bit more relaxed in the role that I'm in, because if I know that person is trying and they have that capability, I can talk to anyone.
Yeah, and what would you say to someone who maybe doesn't know about AFCEA or, is under 40 and wants to get involved with emerging leaders? Any advice there?
I know that there are a lot of different constraints that an individual has to go through right now. It could be education, it could be military service, it could be job, it could be family, get home life, right? Um, uh, but being able to align yourself, excuse me, with a professional organization and being able to get exposure to other professionals allows you to develop a self, let me rephrase that, allows you to be able to have a 360 of where you stand in the community. If you see one of your peers that is absolutely killing it and you're trying to figure out, instead of being jealous and saying, hey, why does that person have something that I don't have? What are the skills or what is the traits that I need to develop as a individual so I can be like that person, right? And so, but you cannot do that by looking at LinkedIn or Instagram and being in your own house or your own apartment. You have to uh, expose yourself to these different environments to be able to be better. And AFCEA gives you a safe space to be able to mature on your own leadership style, because if you're not doing well, someone will pull you off to the side and say, hey, you need to readjust. And it's up to you to either adjust or get moved to another position.
Right. I love that it's like a safe space to kind of shape your career and your qualities um, as a worker. Yeah. And anything else? Those are kind of all my questions. Anything else you wanted to share about anything you're working on or trends you're seeing or what's next for you?
So we're at a interesting time, um, as a organization or as a nation, right? Because there's the amount of emerging technologies that are coming out right now, with the emergence of AI and or artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the increase of big data and how social media has an influence on our day-to-day lives. This is our father's wars are different from our today's wars, and our today's wars are going to be vastly different from our future wars. And so to be able to be a value add, you have to be always keeping your knife sharp. And so my what I'm seeing is that there's so much new technology that's out there that it's going to be hard for a person to be able to be as me or a subject matter expert at all of it. So pick up a technology that you actually care about and that you're willing to read more than an hour in a book, and pick that up and develop that skill set. But with that understanding that that possibility, that skill set is going to need to be able to evolve 3 years down the road. So being able to have a forecasting capability to say what's next and keep on developing what's next.
Yeah, that's really, really great wisdom. I like that, thinking one technology that you're really kind of jazzed about, and sinking, spending time and sinking into, being an expert just in that area. Um, Anything else you wanted to add, or any other words of wisdom?
Well, and so for the majority of the time that I've been talking a little bit about my technology career, right? But understand both sides of the equation. So a technologist needs to understand how business works. Because the biggest challenge between leadership and the technologists is sometimes they are not operating on the common language. Uh, Fully understand that I speak geek. Not a lot of people speak geek, but if you're able to decipher geek and to put it into terms of uh, mission value or return on an investment and start quantifying it with numbers, it'll be amazing how much more that the CIO has influence inside the boardroom or inside of the J6s of the world. And I think that requires learning how to write, learning how to speak well, being able to be clear and concise in their communication. And I think that's but I also put that same ownership on the senior leadership. Um, Technology is becoming more and more a part of the everyday facet of life. So if you don't have at least a basic understanding of how technology influences the younger generation, you're going to be put out pasture faster than what you were expecting.
Yeah, that's a key point, and I guess maybe I could delve into that a little further. Like, what advice would you have to senior leaders about, emerging leaders or that generation who's younger, that maybe they need to pay attention to or understand, um, about, that younger generation?
So, one of the I'll keep the one leader that I highly respect a lot. I'll keep his name off of this particular conversation because I didn't check with him prior to having this. But as he was going through the different officer ranks, he called me up and said, "Hey, Austin, what books do I need to read? What online courses that I need to take?" Now, this was a intelligence officer needing to understand how technology was shaping his battlefield. And so I would sit down with him and I would have conversations based on the books that we read, or be able to touch up on saying, "Hey, how are you doing with this?" And to be able to um, develop a common understanding of this technology, in which a lot of times he brought in a different perspective from mine, where he was bringing more of the national defense capability or the more of the national capabilities angle to my technology, and I was bringing technology to his national capability conversation. And so the willingness to learn is important, and being able to be humble enough to say that I don't know. And that is someone who is developing that warrior mentality. Understanding what you don't know allows you to be able to strengthen, and so you become a better warrior in the future.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Um, and then anything else to add? I think I could talk to you all day. You have such great thoughts and ideas, but anything else?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to the AFCEA community. This is one of those organizations that I will always be a part of in different capacities. Sometimes a little bit more active, sometimes a little less active because you got to give an opportunity for other people to shine. Um, but at any time frame where I can help out, um, not only veterans, but people that are willing to learn to be able to get to the next stage, I'm always willing to do so. So thank you for this opportunity.
Mhm. Well, thank you. And thanks for all you did for emerging leaders in your previous roles and what you're doing now for AFCEA and the greater community. And thank you for all you did for our country, serving in the Air Force and protecting us. You know, that's a huge thing. And thank you for all that. So,
Thank you, ma'am.
all right, have a good day. Thanks again.
Bye.